These are the first notes we have taken. And it is over selective breeding and natural selection.
I'm a different breed.
So make sure where it says topic, you write that. For the essential question, what you should know after today is what are selective breeding and natural selection? And what is different about them? Okay. Now, if you hear the word selective breeding, this also means artificial selection. So if you hear selective breeding, this is also known as artificial selection. Okay? So selective breeding is the process of breeding plants and animals for particular traits. Fancy way of saying trying to get out specific things to show up in the generations, right? So if we're talking about dogs, you're trying to get a dog that's taller and bigger, or shorter and smaller. So every time that you breed a dog, you want it to be with another dog that is short and small, right?
Yeah.
If we're talking about cattle and we're trying to get cows that are beefier, leaner meat, bigger muscle, right? You breed cows that
have bigger muscles,
have those traits, right?
I don't want a cow that is able to stand up and just punch me in my face.
They wouldn't be able to do that.
No, they're not that smart yet, Wade.
So artificial selection is, again, the process of breeding animals for a particular, or plants for a particular trait. They've done this with lots of things that you have today in the world. This process is artificial, meaning it's all about the human preference. It doesn't happen naturally. This is humans artificially breeding, not artificially breeding, but breeding things for a specific trait. Now this affects the population of that species because later you've got fewer and fewer things to breed together that have those traits that aren't related directly, which we'll talk about as a disadvantage. All right, so there are, of course, advantages and disadvantages to this type of breeding. Advantage, you get what you want out of the species. Either something that tastes better, something that looks better, something that meets the needs that whatever the human wanted out is coming out.
So if I want really big kitty cats, I breed 2 big kitty cats.
You breed kitty cats or you breed cats that are on the larger size.
So
you wouldn't want to breed a large cat with a small cat because then
they make
you
it.
probably wouldn't have the large cat come out.
You would have like a medium.
You might have a medium cat or a small cat or a large cat. There's more variation that you possibly have.
I want 6 big kitty cats.
No,
Big cat.
because if you did that, it wouldn't give you a species that could survive.
Breed like a 6 feet.
Like when you breed a mule and a horse, it gives you
Donkey?
right? And then the donkeys can't reproduce.
Wait, why?
Wait, really?
Correct.
I did not know that.
Either that or mules can't reproduce.
Because
It's
mules
donkeys,
can.
is it donkeys and horses?
Yeah, I think it's donkeys and
Donkeys
horses.
Donkeys and horses can
have
do
the
mules,
thing, and
and
then
mules can't.
yeah, mules.
I can't remember which it is, but
I
one of them.
I'm pretty sure it's the meal that can't reproduce.
Yeah.
Look it up.
All right, so selective breeding does have advantages, okay? Because you get a certain trait that comes out, or a certain trait that you want out. So they'll pass that on to generation. So you're getting what you want out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Advantages can be like if you're trying to breed plants to be more disease resistant, right? More bug resistant, that sort of stuff. You get a plant that's better, right? If you're breeding a horse to run faster, have more endurance, right? If you're breeding a cow to have leaner meat, have more red meat, okay? If you're breeding dogs to be calmer around people as opposed to nipping at little children, right? If you're breeding for strength, right? That sort of stuff. You can get out that desirable trait in generations. But there are also disadvantages. Yes.
Did you know that Great Danes only live to be 18 years old?
Most
That's a big deal.
Most dogs don't live too far past 8.
My
Most
dog
dogs,
Brutus lived to be
somewhere
15.
between 8 and 15 is a normal dog age.
My dog died at 18.
My dog is 17 years old.
Mine died at
His
18.
name's Willie.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Alright, so this is all about humans breeding a desirable trait that helps humans, right? We breed dogs to be calm around us. We breed cows to have more meat. We breed chickens to have more meat. We breed plants to be more disease resistant, right? In many cases, this makes the species or thing stronger. But there are also disadvantages to this, okay? When you breed, usually you need to have something that is purebred, meaning it has that trait and it will only pass that trait on. Well, it's hard to find those, right? Because there's fewer and fewer that fit that particular thing. So if we're talking about, say, dogs, if you have a purebred golden retriever, meaning mom was a golden retriever, dad was a golden retriever, you get a golden retriever out, you don't get a mutt, right? More than likely, mom and dad somewhere down the line, or possibly directly, were related. Okay? Because in order for you to get a purebred out, a lot of times you have either brother and sister or cousins, dog-wise, right?
So if you bred like a weenie dog and a golden retriever, would it like?
You'd still get a dog out.
Well, yeah. Oh, but like, would it be the weenie dog and you be gold?
I have no idea. I've never seen a breed of weenie dog and golden retriever.
Look it up.
You have to look that
Look it up.
No, I'm stuck on that. I have to look that up.
So basically, the gene pool gets too small, meaning there aren't enough of that to get you something that isn't directly related. So the genes are so similar, there are mutations that happen that actually pass on undesirable characteristics like illnesses, genetic illnesses that show up. Like my mom had a mastiff. And she bought it and it ended up having a liver disease that was genetic and a kidney disease that was genetic, but it was a purebred mastiff and that's what she wanted. But she got those negative things too, because it's purebred. And a lot of times those show up because of the collapse in population. It means inbreeding happens, brother and sister, cousins, and dogs, you know? So when you're only breeding for one trait, sometimes you overlook any other trait, okay? So there's also cases with like cows. If you breed for a cow that is super big and muscular and get you all that red meat, there are things that happen in that
You like that?
affect how the cow can live. So in this case, if you've got a cow that is super muscular, sometimes that cow can't naturally give birth to a calf. So guess what? Now that cow can't naturally give birth, and they have to do C-sections in order for the cow to get a baby out.
So like,
Baby.
Which is
yeah.
not a good thing, cutting into the cow.
But like, So if there's like two different things and they're bred together, could that one breed with another dog? So it's like a mix of two dogs breeding with another regular dog, and then you mix those two together, and then like so
The
say
same species can breed with the same species, yes.
so like no say I bred two of the most polar opposite dogs and two of the most same dogs,
As long as
and
they're
then
the
both of their
same
babies
species,
bred.
as long as they're the same species, you should be able to get a healthy dog that can breed.
Oh, they're not species.
They're not the same species. Dogs are all the same species.
It was the Chihuahua and whatever the big one.
All right, so
Great
if you're
Dane.
only breeding for one trait, there's lots of negative things that could possibly happen too. Like in this case here that's given to you, there's a rooster, and what roosters usually do is they come up with this courtship dance. Well, they bred the rooster to be bigger and stronger. Well, the rooster was bigger and stronger and grew faster, but it was never able to learn the courtship dance. So what happened was the rooster would try to courtship a hen, and the hen would be like, no, that's not a courtship dance, and kill the rooster.
Wait, what?
Murder.
So do you think that that is going to help that species to survive?
No.
No, okay? So in this example, the rooster wasn't able to do the courtship dance because it was heavy, muscular, and fastly grown, and it never learned how to perform the typical courtship dance because of those things. And that hen said, nope, goodbye.
Dude, what if the humans were like that? Like, say he likes to dance or something, so somebody just killed him.
What if the
We are more civilized than animals.
Chickens.
Sometimes.
I mean, I don't know.
We're not doing what it's, okay. So here is an example of selective breeding.
Yo.
If ever you had a carrot, it has been selectively bred to taste the way it does, to look the way that it does. Okay? Most everything that you see at the supermarket is selectively bred to look the way it does and taste the way it does. Okay?
What do white carrots taste like? I only
Like
eat white
regular
carrots.
If ever you've eaten corn,
Oh, that's
if
cool.
you've eaten sweet corn, it has been bred to taste the way it does.
Sweet.
The reason why it is sweet is because it has been bred to be sweet.
Corn is good.
Okay? In this case, it's talking about Indian corn or maize, and it was bred to look the way it does. Cattle are bred to have more lean, more meat to them, more red meat to them.
Look, you can tell us this mama because this got dots on his head like the mama. Oh, yo.
Then you've got dogs. Dogs have been bred, selectively bred, to look the way they do.
That's a big dog.
You've got dogs that are small, you've got dogs that are big. They're both dogs, they both could breed, but more than likely that's not going to
I
happen.
want to be next to dogs.
Okay?
What would happen?
So dogs are a good way to look at selective breeding because you can see the difference within 45 to 100 years. You can see the difference of how dogs have changed.
Wow.
That thing's
Because they
bigger than I
selectively
am.
breed. Like we
It
had, what's called, anybody know what a Shar-Pei is? A Shar-Pei is a type of dog, and it's got like tan fur, and it's got lots of wrinkles on its face.
Oh yeah, that dog's illegal.
Well, Shar-Peis are usually bred for more wrinkles, right?
Ew.
Well, what happens when you get that more wrinkles is there are diseases that can show up inside of those wrinkles, and there is a negative thing for those more wrinkles, right?
Yeah, and like my dog, he's a pug, and like he has wrinkles all in his face. Mom's like, you have to clean those out, because if not, he'll start to get infections in there and everything.
I could ride that
What
dog
does it look like
with
if it's smashed in the face by a frying pan?
All right, so selective breeding. Human involvement happens in selective breeding. Selective breeding is the same thing as artificial selection. Okay? It's all about breeding for a specific trait that is beneficial for what the human wants. Okay? If you remember from Darwin, he bred what bird?
Finches.
No, he looked at finches.
Origins.
Pigeons.
Bred pigeons when he got back to England to see this selective breeding process to try to prove natural selection.
Oh, yeah.
Now, natural selection is something that he and that other guy came up with, right? Or possibly came up with, right? And the main difference between artificial selection and natural selection is the human involvement, okay? The human involvement. With natural selection, it's something that happens in nature. And in nature, the thing that is important is being able to reproduce and the survival of the species. Okay? Survival of the fittest is what natural selection is all about. So it's all about improving survival or reproductive ability. Okay?
My parents always told me that natural selection was about like things being reborn and stuff like that. They didn't with death.
Natural selection does deal with death because if you aren't able to survive, then you aren't able to reproduce.
Yeah.
Okay?
I also watched episodes.
Survival of the fittest. Now, it's not survival of the fittest as in it's the one that is in the best shape, it's the one that can run the fastest. Sometimes that is true, but it's not that fittest. It's which one is fit for its environment that it's in. If you're not fit for the environment, you can't survive.
I'm fit in any
If you
environment.
can't survive, you can't reproduce. Corbin, stop talking while I'm talking.
Sir, I don't like to cook.
Again, natural selection and artificial selection or selective breeding, the big difference is the human's involvement. Okay? Humans involved by specific traits trying to show up. You're trying to control what is being bred. It is very goal-oriented. You're trying to get something out in the end. Now, how does this connect with what we've already learned about natural selection? Well, Charles Darwin, the guy we talked about, was the one that came up with natural selection. He proposed that natural selection and selective breeding both are evidence of genetic variations in a species and population over time, meaning it's going to be different. You don't look exactly like mom, you don't look exactly like dad. There are variations between you and your parents, genetically and physically, right? Because genes determine the traits that you have. Those variations show up by genetic crossing and stuff like that. So you don't look exactly like mom or dad. You look similar, but not exactly. Okay? And he showed this in his studies in the Galapagos Islands and with his studies with pigeons and his selectively breeding pigeons. And you can see that this shows up in dogs and horses and cattle and pigeons if we selectively breed them. It also shows up in like plants and whatnot that we selectively breed too. You'll learn this week about a specific plant that actually produces a lot of the things that you eat at the store if you eat these things. And we'll talk about that this week too. At this time, that's the end of the notes. What you have time to work on now is your natural selection from last Friday, which is